exhibition. It lasts something like 13 minutes, 14 minutes altogether with text. And then we will start the presentation. Search for radical incomplete, the perfect animal within, is curated by Durmusoglu. And besides this work, it also features the works of several selected artists, which are shown not only in Kosovo for the first time, but also the majority of them in the region for the first time. I'll just name the work by León Ferrari, Nuria Güell, Emre Hüner, the work by Clara, Bouchra Khalili, Erdem Tasdelen, and Susanne M. And for us, it's a great opportunity to hear from the artist a bit more about the work and her practice. I'll just read something from her biography. So, Clara was born in Sao Paulo and is based in Sao Paulo and Berlin. Her work is characterized by the criticism of contemporary society, considering its political and historical implications. Her work is based on the use of several medias, such as installation, sculpture, and video. Clara has worked as well as assistant of the curator Regis Michel, right, in the Louvre Museum, and as assistant in the 7th Berlin Biennial curated by Apelo, together with Joanna Vanza and Vojna. She's a member and contributor of Critica Politicna. I'm really happy that you are here, and I would like you to tell us more about the work and your practice, and to share more information, because somehow this is for us only like opening doors and to learn more about the context and your practice. So, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, so I think I will start speaking about this work specifically. The work is produced together in collaboration with this woman that appears, which is not an artist herself. She's an activist from a movement called Mães de Maio, which is a movement of mothers that gather those women who lost their kids through police violence, but in the democratic period in Brazil. I don't know how many of you know, but Brazil was under dictatorship since 64 until 85. And back in this period, a lot of people died through police violence and state violence. But now, after the democratic period, those practices actually never stopped. And she's one of the women who lost their kids in 2006 in a slaughtering that killed more or less 600 to 1,000 kids in 1 week. And they gathered this movement to claim the memory and the right to actually get the recognition from the state. And the idea to work, I already collaborated with this movement before, doing some works to them and videos and stuff. But the idea was to actually reflect, because in Brazil we have probably the imagery you have from Brazil is a more festive and a more positive idea of a nation that you have racial democracy, you would have party, you would have carnival and football celebration, but not. There is no reference to a sort of history that doesn't actually get to the hegemonic narrative of historical constitution of the nation state. You wouldn't have the history of colonization, because Brazil was founded through Portuguese colonial system that implicated indigenous people massacre, slavery trade, and dictatorships and so on. So I've been thinking a lot about this, how through the artistic or cultural practice we can exhumate those stories and try to find and to fight for a political discourse that could confront those more established standard narratives of the country. And the specific place in this cemetery, what happened is that in 90, a graveyard, a mass graveyard was found. A grave that was used by the dictatorship to hide bodies of political dissidents. And this was a monument that was built after the exhumation of the bodies, which the saying is that we should not forget and so on. But funny enough is that researching in this place, I found in a hidden area daily burial of indigent people. It comes, a lot of them also because they were killed by death squads of military police that still exist in Brazil. And what we did is that we wrote together this text, me and Debora, which is a text based on conversations we had in testimonial that we heard from other women that also passed through the same situation. We wrote this text and we staged this, but all the other parts, apart from her speech, all the other images you have that are also, these are all documentary footage. This is not staged, so the burial you will have in the end, this is also documented in a sense. And we play in the sense by the footage because we used a very sort of cinematic language. You would have this very controlled camera movements, you would have cinematic lenses. So somehow you have the visual representation that doesn't fit to a more documentary straight form, but it's very controlled and very also staged, which actually also relates to this idea of what is the status of construction of a historical narrative. This is also a construction, so in a sense it's also reflecting in the act of constructing history, not as a data, just exposing the data, but laboring around this data. And also you have a sort of parallel montage between this monument, because this is where the grave was found, and they built the structure of a brick that you will see in the next frame. And we would montage, or we would do the editing parallel with this open grave. So you would have those two times somehow, these two historic periods merged in the same continuous image. And that would also more or less reflect or try to think in some things that we speak a lot, me and Debora, about this sort of continuous history, of this continuous state of exception, the state of emergency, in which a certain kind of the population actually doesn't get access to any political transformation. You would have democracy, you would have dictatorship, you would have several different political systems, But this doesn't get to the whole population. So we have citizens, but also you have a second category, which is governed by the same sovereign state, but they don't get the same rights, they don't have the same recognition. So in a sense, it's reflecting to this undercover, to this like non-told story, right? In a continuous sense, you would create this temporal compression through the editing and the montage of the film. And I mean, I think, and it was produced in the context of the biennial, which normally, I mean, it's a very biennial of São Paulo. And it was produced like that, also thinking about the public to which normally the exhibition would have, because it's a public that can more or less no, the majority of it comes from public schools and a lot of kids and teenagers. So we would also think a little bit in this pedagogic sense, not pedagogic in the sense of like in a totalitarian act, but in a totalitarian act of saying what is right or wrong, but in the sense of opening up a space, a territory to discuss about those issues. So we used the work also together with the educational team, because me and Debora, we also did a lot of workshops with the educational team of the biennial to think about the work, to discuss the work, so the work would actually trigger other discussions with the public when they would come. And this was the context of the production of the work.
And how many, if I can ask, how much these stories are part of the mainstream, let's say, discussions, media, political discussions, and how does it reflect? I mean, the presence of a large art event like the biennial, how much does it penetrate in the mainstream? And then
well, you would have mainly in the newspaper and the media, in a sense, like journalism and so on, you would have, through the cultural sector, you would have some more or less linking the debate with politics and so on. But it's an event that has a lot of repercussion. So it's a good place to put in place certain questions and certain political questions. And interesting enough is because this event, the foundation of Biennale, it's also very represents a lot of this old aristocracy that Brazil, I mean, is built around. So these old families that went there to occupy the land, they still somehow rule the country. And the foundation basically is run by the grandfathers of these old landlords. Somehow it's also a way to, within sort of squatting in and trying to opening up a space over there.
But is it a guaranteed space, like a provided space by the biennial?
And what are the provided space?
You know, when you create a certain space, but which is still pretty much controlled, you know, when you talk about repercussions, what would they be or mean?
In terms of the people who were, or in the newspaper?
When you talk about the possibility for repercussions, if you discuss or place such content within such a structure.
Well, I mean,
what would they mean?
They tried first to censor the work from, I mean, I'm speaking about more institutional sense.
Yeah.
We had a lot of struggle, and they tried, at least with this specific work, tried to kind of more or less direct it, and then afterwards when the work was done, trying to put some censors concerning age, which I fought a lot because they were putting, they wanted to put a label for under 18 and so on, so that the majority of the public wouldn't see because they come from those schools. But then I followed some of the meetings with the educational team, so the discussions were pretty interesting because the people who would come, they were identified directly with this, especially those coming from public schools from more peripheral regions, and from more critic and all that other sector, they were pretty positive answers, but also answers in a more negative sense, because Brazil somehow has a very tradition a very strong tradition of a formalist art. So they would think that this is too political in a sense. And apart from that more art-related field, the interesting part is that this was used also by the National Commission of the Truth in some audience, so this kind of trial and so on, and we conducted also this sort of parallel circulation of the work, which is not directly within art, but more connected to political activities somehow. And Brazil is also establishing, like in South America, we would have that in Argentina, there's National Commissions of Truth, which tries to investigate crimes from the dictatorship, goes under files and try to see how many people were killed, what happened, and so on. And in those sort of contexts, this also happens to be shown and to be discussed in this.
With these national commissions for truth, I mean, how are they constituted? Who creates them?
The Brazilian case is a pretty specific one. It was established by the Dilma government. Probably you know it's Brazilian president right now. That doesn't mean really much. I mean, this doesn't reflect in the policies that she's conducting now, because it's pretty neoliberal standard sort of policies. But anyhow, she established this National Commission of Truth, which in my point of view, instead of really being used as a way to investigate and to somehow make sort of a accountability of history in place, meaning that give responsibility to those who are directly involved, it's used a little bit as a sort of reconciliation tool. Because this is also pretty common in Brazil. You would have, for instance, abolition of slavery, but then no policy is conducted. So somehow I think that the oppressed and the oppressor, they would normally festively celebrate in the reconciliation in a very docile way. And I think the Commission of Truth somehow is doing this. It's getting all those people who suffered with the dictatorship and with state violence, and say, okay, we're doing something, but in the end, you're not doing trials, you're not punishing people, you're not doing nothing. So basically, you're producing paper reports and putting them somewhere in files in national libraries. So that wouldn't convert to a really politicizing process of the civil society, because you wouldn't have like broadcasts of those trials, you wouldn't have anything, you don't have the trials, you don't have nothing. So basically, that is not a politicizing process. I think I understand that more as a conciliation method, which we quite are used to. Sorry.
Not to have the only possibility for making questions, and I'm interested more. I mean, you can also make questions if you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can. You always can. We were speaking, but if you want to make even like make questions about this work, about Brazil, about whatever cultural scene. Not that I'm representative, but I can more or less speak a little bit if you like.
Tell us more about your practice. So, besides this work, what would the subjects be, or the ways of how you address issues, and just to sort of you cannot show them right now, but just to have an idea.
Well, I try to work with aesthetics and with the forms, let's say, meaning that video, sculpture, installation, that you mentioned, in a sense that to understand forms as ways to open up political discussion. And I always think about the work as a setup, not much to represent, but to open up the space for discussion. So more than just telling about something, either to create those forums in which each person can reflect or somehow project or understand about their own context. And basically what I've been in terms of topics, I found that quite strange to say, but I've been thinking a lot about Brazilian history, in the sense, like all the conditions in which the nation state was built and so on, and what were the costs, and what actually doesn't get to be represented, in a sense, doesn't become visual representation, doesn't become nothing, this sort of forced amnesia, how to deal with those non-existing images, sounds, people, bodies, how to deal with this, and try to link all of this with a larger system, meaning like capital expansion, because that was what formed the country. Capitalism expansion outside Europe, right? So we would have the colonial system established in South America. So basically, that's more or less the field of research.
And it's probably never ending, right? Topics. Like these.
Yeah, they're quite large, so that's good because you always have stuff to do and to think.
Okay. If you don't have questions, this can be it.
No, I just want to ask you if this piece was produced for last São Paulo Biennale?
Yes.
The Child Search and Galleria.
Yeah. 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you need a visa to enter Kosovo?
No, I
No?
didn't. No, actually not.
You have a Brazilian passport?
What?
You have a Brazilian passport?
I got a Brazilian passport.
Uh-huh.
They didn't ask me anything
Oh, okay.
for a visa. They just asked me if I live in Europe and what I was doing.
No, if you have a Schengen, they don't ask for a visa. So.
But it's strange that you asked because we didn't do anything about it actually.
Because usually
A lot
the
of
countries
people
that
ask.
recognize Kosovo.
Yeah, that's what we're talking. It still doesn't recognize Kosovo, but anyways, they, I don't need a visa.
If you would come directly from Brazil, you would need a visa. But since you came from Berlin or from Europe,
You think so?
yeah, sure.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. So maybe I didn't check it correctly, but I thought it was no visa required.
for some states, yes.
Okay.
And Brazil was one of them.
Okay. Well, good to know.
You said it's staged, this part where the burial is. It's not staged. No.
The site is not staged.
No, it's not staged. That's the interesting thing because we could set up. I don't know how much you are familiar with this, but just to make a sort of traveling like this, you have to install this metal piece, like sort of a how do you say trail?
Yeah.
Which is not.
That moves.
Yeah, it's not. It's pretty heavy. It takes quite a while, and it's not that easy. But we did this pretty easy. The guys were doing their job, and nobody cared. And then we traveled with the camera, and nobody cared. So it's pretty surreal because the way we film it gives this impression. You don't know what is happening. You know?
And the way they are handling
But this is regular, huh? This is
Really?
Not, we didn't ask anything. We're just This is the way
The
because
ending is,
what?
they didn't really take care, just like throw.
Yeah, they just
Because they come daily in like 30 to 60.
So it's for them, it's like
of
really
these coffins. So it's
industrialized.
And they cannot close and everything, so this
Routine. And apparently these are just numbers anyways.
Yeah, in the end they have no names and they are just buried as these numbers that you see in the wood piece. That would be the number that refer to this body because they are buried as indigent. Yeah, a lot of complicated stories because a lot of them come with identification. They come with names or documents, but they are somehow identified afterward with this name. So we were also playing with this because in the text you would have the reference to those people, like their numbers. They didn't become monuments, they didn't become street names, but still they're our sons. They didn't die as slaves or terrorists. They died as father, brothers. They're people, but somehow they're transformed in this abstract language.
And you know how many people approximately were died after 85?
Actually, that's interesting because the death rate, how do you say that? Numbers, they increase a lot afterwards. Much more than
But from not natural causes, you mean? Or
No, that's cause.
Death squads.
Murder
Okay.
through police violence.
Okay.
Because we would finish the dictatorship, but the police was maintained militarized, and they still work more or less in the same way.
And why they were killing them? From which zones they were coming? From which parts?
More now. Yeah,
Favelas?
from the poor areas. So somehow the target is not more the
Poor areas of São Paulo?
Everywhere, not just in São
Not like from Amazon or something, no.
Everything, like in the countryside you would have also the peasants, killings of peasants, but also in the cities, in these poor areas, the suburban areas in which you would have like a favela and so on, the people would come and they use this these ninja balaclavas, you know this kind of,
Yes.
in black cars and they come and they
We
shoot.
grew up with this.
Yeah. And so we would have these killings, and the 2006 is a very strong one, even if not many people know, but in 1 week is this.
Well, this is then associated to crime then. If you go into favelas, if you have to deal with a very hard crime, you cannot, it's very tricky question. You cannot like really take care about human rights and you always lose against crime.
What do you mean about crime?
If you want to like criminal activities.
But they're not. But the point is that the police is not killing. I mean, first of all, if you are committing a crime, you have a law regulation. You should be judged under the law, and we don't have capital. We don't have death capital. How do you say?
Punishment.
Yeah, that's punishment.
Death punishment.
I
So you
understand
shouldn't
that.
be
I
killed.
So it's illegal.
In
So it's
in
illegal.
theory, yes, yes.
So that's the point. You would have democracy, but then you have an extra state somehow running together alongside with this, and nevertheless, the democracy is functioning.
Yeah, but this in theory sounds like it, but I think in reality it's much more complicated.
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
Even to if you want to challenge this crime as a police squad, I'm not trying to defend them, but it's very tricky. It's very sensitive. You cannot challenge a crime organized so well with a law which is like valid in Denmark or in Germany. Or you can try that, but then you'll never be successful.
First of all, we're not speaking about criminals that are being murdered. There are a lot of regular people that are not at all involved in crimes that are being
That's why I was
She
just
said they're not terrorists, they're not...
They're just collateral effects of those actions. You know, you would come here, eventually somehow you think that one of you is a criminal, and then you enter and you shoot absolutely everybody. And then, eventually the guy was a criminal, but everybody died together.
Yes.
And that's fine. You know.
Yeah, I understand.
So it's pretty complicated. And I mean, this is the point. Like, if you have a law regulation, if the state should function, you shouldn't have that kind of
If you have a
practice.
constitution,
If you have a constitution, so
government,
why do you have
police,
those all formal structures if they are not functioning at all? If they do not operate.
But you can make it. You can have one law which will be valid everywhere, and really everybody will listen to that or do the life like that. That's
So
why
why should-
there are
so
the
why should
differences.
they-
I'm
so
not
why
saying
should they-
terrorism. It's
Okay,
not
so
about
why
terrorism.
should they obey the state? Why should they pay taxes? If
Yeah.
it's not ready, it's not functioning for them. You know, if they're, I mean,
Yes.
it's pretty bad.
But you were already talking about the state not recognizing a part of its society, you know, and if you treat like second-grade citizens, and then you have this class which should obey
because
the law, that's the
somehow in Brazil, you wouldn't
segregation.
have directly ethnical, though it's part of it, but you would have a very class cut. Like the state recognizes a certain class.
Yeah, that's
And then the
very
rest
clear.
is
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, of course, and they are influenced by these high classes.
I don't know if you read this text by Ben Belushi about elections in Albania. It's not related, but just to this poor. He said about the Socialist Party. I mean, it's not a party anymore because he says a poor person can never become someone in the Socialist Party anymore. You know, a poor person. He's not rich. You know, he's not influential. I mean, he says this is not a party anymore. And it relates to this, you know, as well. So the
Yeah, but this happened everywhere. Even in Spain, we had a Socialist Party which were before the crisis they were in charge like for 8 years, and they still call the Socialist Party. And
Maybe just a fashion party when you went to school, you know. Here, it's still possible, you know, so not only people from rich families and this controlled, they can, you know, become prime minister.
yeah, because of special circumstances.
Special circumstances, but they were considered
Not anymore, maybe. Yeah.
by Serbia, they were considered like these people in favelas.
Yeah, of course.
So what made you come here?
What's hard?
What made you come to Kosovo?
Well,
She was invited by the curator of the exhibition just
Yeah.
to reply.
yeah.
I just wanted to relate a bit your piece again with São Paulo Biennale. I mean, besides all these problems of phones and what happened during São Paulo Biennale, I would like to hear from you if somebody from the municipality or from the state saw your film, and what did you have any reaction after that?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Because I know it was very big. I mean, everywhere in the media, all this like, should we take part or not after this? Israeli phones and stuff like this, so-
I mean, we would have people directly connected with the police department checking the exhibition, and that we knew, and some of them I saw, and of course there were, especially in the openings, you have those representatives of governments that
Yeah.
know and so on, and yeah, for sure they saw, and what happened afterwards was interesting because the municipality, the part of Department of Human Rights, but with the municipality, they invited me and Debora to participate in a film screening in which they would show this, you know. And yeah, and I found that pretty curious, you know, pretty.
They didn't said anything after the screen.
What?
They didn't said anything after the screen or before the screen.
No. I mean, the people would see and so on, but not officially, not. They're just inviting and that kind of things.
But there are changes in the country, right? If there's this commission about reconciliation, things like things are moving forward, or it's becoming worse. Right.
In what terms?
I mean, is it a bit better? I mean, like than in 2006, right?
2006.
Compared to, I mean, would you be able to do a work like this in 2006, let's say?
Well, I don't think it's getting better, huh?
Yeah.
I don't think it's getting better. I think what is happening is that somehow the landscape is changing, but not necessarily better. Because if you speak about the federal level, I mean the government, the Dilma and so on, the project also involved those kind of practices. Maybe not with people in the cities, but people in the countryside. So you would have this major project of infrastructure, and if the people will resist, you just kill them or whatever, you know. So you would have the same sort of idea of a sort of development of the country that has some costs and that might kill some people, you know. And I mean, in terms of economy, Brazil for a couple of years was being portrayed as, oh, the economy is going so great, Brazil is doing so good and so on. But what happened actually, we had like this massive amount of lumpens before. And what the Workers' Party did when they're in the government, they're just giving a small amount of money, which actually doesn't make people really change classes. They're not just lumpens anymore. You know?
What is lumpens?
Lumpen is this extreme miserable condition, you know, that you cannot afford even your food.
Mostly the people living in favela and stuff, but still they did.
But still.
Dilma government and the previous government, what's the guy's name?
Lula.
Yeah, Lula. They still, of course, might improve much better the poorest classes' condition. Their access to economy, to
basic,
basic education.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who has no electricity, for somebody who cannot eat every day.
Yeah, their life is much better. Like it's more improved than 10 years ago,
well,
than
it's
15
not
years
much
ago.
better. If you see what happened in the riots in 2013, that reflects more or less those kind of ideas.
But that is connected to this huge spending also of the stadiums, which is stupid, making stadium in Macau, which nobody's going to use anymore, you know?
No, that's the point, because they're not governing for the people, they're governing for investors. And also doing that kind of policies with people attracts money, investors, because the level of social development somehow appears to be more,
No, of course, but I mean, comparing to other governments, it's still much better.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not archaic, it's not colonial anymore, yeah. I mean, in that
No,
sense,
not colonial, but still much better for,
Yeah.
at least for the poorest people, for the...
Well, yeah. I mean, but also we were discussing this before, because the way that they're including those people, it's not really giving them citizenship, but it's a sort of a citizenship through consumerism. So you would have credit to buy a car, and this already changed your level, your status in society. It would be considered as a middle class because you will have a car now.
Yeah.
But could you get a credit to study abroad,
Abroad, no.
for instance?
Well, no, you don't need to study abroad if Brazil is so huge. It's already...
No, but let's say you are more ambitious or something.
Yeah. No, you would have.
Adventurous.
Adventurous.
You would, yeah.
If you can afford it,
Yeah, if you afford it,
And
then.
as you know, most of the artists now move to Berlin from Brazil, so of
But
course.
Berlin is much cheaper than Sao Paulo.
It's much more cheaper than São Paulo. But anyways, no, you wouldn't have credit for study abroad.
Just, maybe this would be my question, but like, what is the country that the majority of the countries in South Africa, South America look up to? You know, like a model, does it exist, you know, something like...
Not for sure, Argentina.
Because here, for instance, we are totally under pressure, you know, like, okay, European Union and things like that. So we have somewhere to look, right, the direction. How it is in these big countries which have so many problems, and then there's no one like absorbing you and like saying to you, you have to do this and have to do that. So what's the
I think the
political
most,
somehow vision for that part of
you don't have
No, you
really
question
a
that,
model. Back in the 60s, you would have, especially in political, left wing somehow, because Cuba revolution happened, Chile, Allende was being elected, so you would have some ideas, but now not really. And Brazil was, this economy was going okay and so on, so people would look to Brazil as well as a good in terms of, at least in economic sense, sort of a model. But also Brazil is behaving pretty imperialistic with the neighbors, so it's not really. Yeah. And Argentina had the crisis in the 90s, and
Bolivia.
Well, yeah, I mean, no.
Too tiny.
I need to be a model.
No, if you consider basically South America is split between two. So Brazil is like my sister just said, it's like the bigger and the one basically ruling the area. You have Chile at the other side looking directly to United States, like direct connection literally. And Argentina, which is in very, very bad shape. Venezuela, which is kind of disconnected from the area, so to say, right now. And Bolivia is really, it's too
small to be
I'm not sure.
influential.
Yeah, I'm not sure if influenced, but anyhow, U.S. is still a very strong. I mean.
Yeah, I think that's the main problem also.
Would do
At the
is
same
like
time,
mediated
South
to
Africa.
this phantom of
Yes,
the United States,
yes.
because that directly involves embargo. How do you say that?
Embargo.
Boycott, economic boycott, and political boycott. They can implement. They can throw down the president if they like. So it's pretty, every time somehow this phantom. Is
But also the economic, the life and everything is very influenced by the United States.
But they can
All
still
around
do it.
us.
Like they can still throw a president in Brazil.
Well, they tried to do it with Chavez, right?
Yeah.
In 2000 something. I mean, in Brazil, I think they're not even using the statics anymore. They are using more clever ones, But they did. I mean, all the military coups in the 60s were made by them, or not made by them in the sense that they were going there and throwing the presidents, but they were supporting the elites. They were supporting the army. They were training people. They were putting that money directly in the region. Now the strategies are more economical somehow. Where, like Mexico, for instance, that you would have disagreements and so on between nation states.
But in the final, in the very end, the ideal of living is the American way of living. And to consume the products and to have the house with the dog and the big car and
Everything big. Not
Yeah, the bigger the better.
And everything private and everything.
Sometimes the dog is small.
Yeah.
It's not only in Brazil, it's here as well.
Also, see, they managed the
Yeah,
boardwalk. Yeah.
Even the Russian singer at Eurovision sings in English. I don't want to interrupt.
No, yeah, but for instance, the cars, it didn't used to be like that. I remember when I was like a child, it was not that much like these big, massive caravans oriented. Nowadays, all the company cars are that style. And then you say, what for? São Paulo has a massive traffic jam. You don't have, you look at the cars, you look at the buses, everyone is like this. And you look at the cars, there's like one person sitting inside one car and this big car, so it makes no sense.
I
But
think
it's the
they should make a law, like one person in a car alone cannot go out. Not only in Brazil, but I think
Everywhere.
Who said, look who's talking.
mine is small.
The guy was driving all day around. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for
Thank you so much.
coming.